All right, we're going to start our last section of the semester, which is ecology. My favorite quote is, and perfect for the ecology section, when one tugs at a single thing in nature, he finds it attached to the rest of the world. That's John Muir. And as you can see over here, the complexity of this ecosystem, everything is very interconnected. If you change one thing in this ecosystem down to the tiniest, let's see, we have some soil life here, we have fungi, we have predators, we have prey. All of these are all interconnected, as well as the nutrients and the CO2 and the oxygen. There's aquatic plants, everything is interconnected. And all of it ties back to the energy from the sun. And we're going to look at how all of these things are connected in ecology. So what is ecology? Ecology is the study of the interactions of organisms among all organisms, or biotic, and their physical environment, abiotic. So biotic refers to all living things, all organisms. Abiotic, this word right here in bold, that refers to non-living things in your environment, such as rocks, soil, the air, the water, the nutrients. All of these are abiotic. And then you have all of these vocabulary words that you need to know. Habitat, a place where an organism lives. A population, all the individuals of a species within a particular area at a certain time. Community, all those populations in a certain space. For example, all the different populations at a coral reef. And then you have the ecosystem, all of the community, so all of those living things interacting with the environment. So that's both biotic and abiotic things. For example, sunlight is a variable in an ecosystem. So that would be a abiotic component. Biosphere, which would be the zones of the Earth's soil, water, and air where organisms are found. Now, modern ecology is not just descriptive, it is also predictive, meaning we look at what happens if we change one thing in an environment. So we know how closely everything's interconnected when we looked at this chart back here. Modern ecology will say, well, if we suddenly have a disease that takes out a lot of the squirrels here, what's going to happen to the rest of the environment? Or if suddenly the CO2 levels are very high, how will that affect this pond? And those are very complicated questions that require computers. And nowadays we can use computing power and we can predict what will happen in these different environments. One thing we always have to look at is called the carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is going to be what is the maximum number of individuals of a given species that a community can support. I really like this visual down here. If you imagine a fishbowl, and this fishbowl has 3 fish in it, and those 3 fish are perfectly happy in that size fishbowl with the nutrients they have and the food they're being given. However, if we had 20 fish in the same fishbowl, obviously that is far over the carrying capacity of that environment. So it will actually crash the whole environment. And it won't just be those extra 17 that die, but the whole population will not survive because they have far exceeded their carrying capacity. Now, the closer a population size nears the carrying capacity of a community, the more likely its resources will become scarce, and that biotic effects such as competition and predation will become evident. So in the fishbowl example, there are so many things that have reached its capacity, such as the water, the oxygen, the nutrients, the food, all of these things there was not enough of to support that kind of a population. Now, the carrying capacity will fluctuate depending on things such as the amount of rainfall from year to year, and how much food is available, predation, diseases. Those all will cause the carrying capacity to fluctuate in an environment. Now, there are different strategies that organisms can use to survive these fluctuations in the environment and carrying capacities. We're going to look at the different strategies, but first we need to realize what sorts of things can be different between these different strategies. So some of them would be the number of births per reproduction. How many babies do they have at a time? Or how many eggs do they lay? Another one would be the age of reproduction. So does it take 20 years for them to have a baby, or can they have a baby within 20 days of being born? How long does the organism survive? Are they only alive for a few months, or are they alive for a few hundred years? What's the probability of an individual living the entire lifespan? Are they likely to survive once they're born? Very long. So each population is able to capture only so much of the available energy, and how this energy is distributed throughout its lifetime, including the reproduction events and the care of their offspring, that's evolved with the organism over time. For example, this right here is a fish called a cichlid. Now, most fish, when they lay eggs, they just lay eggs into the water and swim off. Don't even think about it again. Like, for example, right here, all of these dots that you can see in this water, those are fish eggs. Our pond right now in our subdivision is covered in these fish eggs. Now, a cichlid is a little bit different. Cichlids are mouth brooders, meaning they keep their eggs within their mouths until they are hatched and they can swim away. My husband and I actually used to breed cichlids in our tank, and they were really fun to watch. You could actually see the babies within these eggs. You can see their little eyes. And they would not eat or anything. They just keep these eggs in their mouth to keep them safe until they were born. So that's a lot of energy that fish will put into making sure these babies survive, as opposed to the fish over here that just lay thousands of eggs and swim off and put no energy there. So the way energy is spent can be used to ensure that offspring survive. Okay, so let's look at two different strategies. The first one is called an R strategist. An R strategist is going to produce large numbers of offspring. They have a small body size. They mature very quickly, meaning they're able to reproduce very quickly. They have a short lifespan. They're not going to live a long time. They do not invest energy in parental care. They tend to be good dispersers and colonizers of new habitats. Some of the examples: bacteria, fungi, many insects, rodents, and annual plants. So here is the fly. We have the dandelion, the mouse. These are fish, eggs. All of these are going to be R strategists. When is this useful? When is this life history pattern useful? Well, in unstable, predictable environments. So let's see, dandelions. They tend to colonize disrupted fields. They colonize very, very quickly. We all know mice. Ooh, they have they mature very quickly, and they have many, many, many babies at a time. As opposed to the other strategy, which is a K strategist. K strategists produce small numbers of offspring. They have a larger body size. They take a while to mature. They don't reproduce right away. They invest energy in parental care. They tend to be strong competitors. They compete for their resources. Some examples are some long-lived plants, so perennials, birds of prey, large mammals, humans. These are going to be any organisms that put a lot of care into their offspring. They want to make sure that they survive. They don't have a ton of them, so they need to make sure the few that they produce do survive. And these are examples. Here we have the bears, and we have elephants, and humans, and chimpanzees. So this chart, when is K selection useful? That would be in stable, predictable environments. And this chart down here is going to show how it's a continuation between R to K strategists. Some organisms are very, very R strategy oriented, such as the oyster, the fish. Some are very, very K strategy oriented, the chimpanzee and the large cat. The chimpanzee, they only have one baby every 5 years on average. The puma has 2 babies a year. Those are both K strategists. These oysters down here, 500 million babies a year, 500 million offspring, that's a ton. The fish, this tuna, 6,000 babies a year. Those are R strategists. They're going to have a ton. You see the opposites. And then there's some animals that kind of fall a little bit in the middle. They're not totally R, not totally K. They're kind of in the middle, such as this rabbit. Rabbit has about 12 a year. That's still a lot. But it's not 6,000 a year or one every 5 years. So the different strategies are going to help them survive during different times, different conditions, whether the environment is stable or unstable. So let's look here at these organisms. We have the bald eagle and we have these ants. And try to think to yourself, is the bald eagle an R or a K strategist? And what about the ants? Are they R or K strategists? Think about that, and I'll come back to that at the end. Okay, so ecology recognizes that both biotic and abiotic conditions play an important role in regulating population sizes in natural environments. So what that means is, let's say all of a sudden this reindeer here, let's see how sharp declines overgrazing. Okay, so let's say this reindeer here suddenly finds itself without any predators, and it starts going through an exponential growth. Like, woo, we have nobody eating us, no predators at all. This is wonderful. The population size is just growing exponentially. And then suddenly there's this decline. Why did the population, if there's no predators, just suddenly start falling like that? That looks awful. Well, what happens is the area becomes overcrowded and that carrying capacity is reached. And once that carrying capacity is reached, there's not enough resources. So all of a sudden, the ranges that they used to eat at were overgrazed. And so the competition becomes fierce and there's not enough resources, kind of like those fish in that fish bowl. And suddenly, instead of just a few of the less competitive dying off, it's the whole population plummets, worse than it was before. So what this is showing is how important predators are to an environment. Every piece of that food web that we are going to discuss in a minute, there's a food web, an energy web, and every piece is very important, including predators, prey, decomposers. Each part of an ecosystem is very important. We're going to get that on our next lecture here. I want to go back to this life history strategies example and see if you know which one each of these is. So this bald eagle here is taking care of its young. We can see that. And there's only a few in this year. And what that tells me is that this is a K strategist. They're going to take care of their young. These down here are ants that are laying tons and tons and tons of eggs. They are kind of taking care of them here, but there's so many of them that they must fall more into the R strategist. They're also small, they have a shorter lifespan, they mature very quickly, so we put these under R strategists. All right, I am going to end the population ecology section and I'm going to come back with community ecology.